So we had a question a few days ago, which was, how do you recall sessions in your mastering studio? And we answered that question, and it followed on to another question. And the next question, the question that someone asked in the comments was, do you think companies will in future adopt the same or similar type of digital recall technology that Bettermaker uses on their hardware? The ability to save sessions configurations directly on the gear and later recall it in a much more practical and accurate manner. Now, this is a good question, and there's a few reasons, and I mean, in an ideal world, let's face it, in an ideal world, it would be brilliant to have instant recall of all analog equipment. But there are a few factors to take into account. Number one being cost. Now, imagine you've got a piece of equipment, and then you've got to adapt that piece of equipment to then turn it into this digitally recallable piece of equipment. There's a cost involved in that, in the actual hardware, having switches and all different, putting USB or USB-C out the back or Thunderbolt, whatever you want to connect on the back, you've got to then connect it to something. Then also there's going to be that sort of cost. So there's going to be a massive cost there. Then you've got to also factor in a cost of development team. So a software development team is going to have to, for each of these companies, they're going to have a team which develops software. The thing with software is software constantly needs updating. So it's a constant team that have to constantly update that software. That's going to factor in to the cost. Now, bear in mind, the majority of people who are, building the hardware, they aren't savvy in the software department. They're not building the software. So they will have to get someone else to do that. The other thing to factor in as well is that, think of it this way: software constantly needs updating. Piece of hardware, once you've got the piece of hardware, put it in, it's to the end of time until that piece of hardware just breaks and no longer is able to be used. It works. The problem you've got with when you integrate it into software is that, if the company do not continue to develop the software over and over again after every new operating system update, getting it ready for, each door that updates, software has to be updated for each door. An M1 chip comes out, you've got to do an M1 update. There is a constant cycle of updating software. With the hardware, once you've sold it, you've technically sold it, it's gone, and you don't ever really have to address any issues with it, as long as it doesn't break, which great sounding hardware doesn't really have any errors in that way. You might have to replace tubes every now and then if it's a tube, something to do with tubes. Now, the thing with the software is going to need to constantly be updated. So there's, from a company's point of view, imagine you sell something and it goes off and it's sold, and then you never hear from it again. Year later, warranty's done. You never ever hear from the people again because it just doesn't break. Software. Now, as soon as you integrate software, you have to constantly provide the person that's bought something with an update. And that update could be 3 times a year. It could be more than that. It could need to constantly be updated, which realistically, the company has to factor in the fact that that's going to cost money, especially if they aren't the developers themselves of the software. They have to get someone else every time to do an update, and it ends up eating right into the profits. So to really kind of answer this question, you have to look at a company like Access Virus. Now, they brought out the Access Virus A, for instance. They did A, B, C, Rack Edition. Then after C, I think there was another one after C, but they then went into this TI series, which is called Total Integration. So they had the Virus Snow TI, the Virus Desktop, the Virus Polar, and it was a TI version. And it was total integration. Total integration meant you had this software, you had this virtual analog synthesizer that had software that you could control, and it would control in the actual piece of hardware. It was brilliant. Really, really, really like groundbreaking kind of technology there. Sold thousands. I had a Virus Snow. I had a TI Desktop. I just had the two. And it was brilliant. And the synth sounded amazing. But now the problem is there's no development of the software. Since Mac OS Catalina, I think it was, nobody's updated the software. So the software's just dead. So you've got all these synthesizers that rely on software that have just kind of, they're not brick walls. They're not bricks basically, but you can still use them, but you can't use them with the software. Or you've got to be using such an old OS that the software runs on. And obviously everybody wants to move forward with their operating system and upgrades and whatnot. And when you buy a new Mac, for instance, it comes preloaded with the latest OS. So you're kind of forced to move forward with your OS. The fact is that now everyone that has an Access virus can't use the software with it because they aren't doing updates on the software, which is bad. But I understand why they're not doing the software updates, because they're fed up. They're probably fed up with jumping through hoops to please Apple and to get this certification that and it's such a faff. It really is. So I totally get it. But on the same hand, if I bought, I don't have them anymore. But if I had an Access virus, I would be deeply annoyed that the software wasn't being updated. Now, bear that in mind across, let's say, for instance, in my mastering studio, I've got 25 pieces of equipment. Now, times that by 25, there's going to be some that don't update their software. The compatibility would be mad. I mean, I've got a Better Maker DAF limiter in the mastering room, and it's brilliant, and the software works great, but it's one piece of software, right? It's one thing that I have to wait for it to update if it needs to update. Like, for instance, when the M1 came out, when you got M1, you couldn't just go out to the shop the day the M1 came out. You couldn't go out to the shop and buy an M1, because you'd get that home and then you'd install everything and you go, well, that don't work. Nothing works. Okay. It's pointless having it. So you had to wait maybe 3 months for the M1 to kind of, it was more the developers to catch up with the M1 chip. Some still haven't. I mean, I've only just got around to the point of being able to buy a Mac Studio because software just wasn't ready. It wasn't compatible with the M1 chip yet, and that will be the case if you go if the industry went down this sort of route of getting having digital recall with every piece of software. The price would rise, the price would go right up. There would be hundreds of compatibility issues, I don't think it would be that great a thing. The thing is with recalling using session recall is it's not all right. It takes, let's say, 5 minutes to recall 20 odd pieces of equipment. It's not a bad amount of time, really. I mean, I'd much rather just quickly dial in all the settings and know that it's right, and away I go. The other thing to mention is that even the Better Maker, and the Better Maker's got really good kind of software integration. Even the Better Maker, sometimes when you turn on, it doesn't connect. You have to just kind of, I don't know, switch it on and off again, and then it will connect. But sometimes it doesn't. Now, again, times that over 20 odd pieces of equipment, it's going to, you will be standing there going, turn it on, off. And then now I've got 19 out of the 20 working. One of them's not working. And this will be every day. Whereas the great thing about hardware is you just switch it on and it's there, ready to go. I mean, some units with tubes, they need to warm up, for instance. The other thing to factor in is, let's say you've got a studio that's got 20 odd 30 units in it. You've got to then have 20, 30 connections to your Mac or PC, which, I mean, that's a lot. That is a hell of a lot to have. And that will be difficult. So as great as it sounds, as lovely as it sounds to be able to turn on your computer, load up a session, and everything just go bzz, 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 all back to normal, it just wouldn't work. It really just wouldn't work. There'd be so many downsides compared to pluses. It just wouldn't work.